Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. This is my good friend Ken, the jazz vinyl lover McAuliffe, the Maltese Falcon, if you will.
Hi, Dan. Doing good. Thank you.
And my name is Dan, the Jazz Shepherd. And welcome to both of our channels. Hope you enjoy the dialogue that's to come here.
Excellent. Yes. And Dan, once again, has come up with his excellent questions, and we'll tag team back and forth on them. Dan and I don't agree on everything. We have different angles into and out of jazz, but we have great respect for each other. And I was thinking today, and you said it before, we are really the lone voices in the wilderness for jazz here on YouTube.
It certainly seems that way. And I get that more from our viewers who comment as such. I know I certainly am one of the people who's covering that classic era as much as anybody, or if not more than anybody.
Well, there is nobody, because all your standard critics, Nate Chinnan, Gary Giddens, Ben Ratliff, they all stay in print. They don't venture into YouTube, but YouTube is really the future. Social media is the future of all this. If they want to seed that ground, I'm happy to do that.
Absolutely.
And we're also, both of us are kind of, to one degree or another, I think of us as street cats.
Yep.
You come from the DJ world. I come from the musician's world, even though I've written a lot too. I mean, I was a musician first, and that's what informs everything I do. So I think that gives us a unique take.
I was a drummer in rock bands for years myself. So yeah, the music band thing. I was a heavy metal drummer for a long time. Then I was in some trip hop bands in the 90s, early 2000s.
Oh, there you go.
So I have some music background as well.
Yeah, that informs. I think that helps to have a contrast on the way you view other forms of music.
Yep. And even hearing melody and rhythm and groove and arrangement, that's all part of being a musician, I think.
Without a doubt. Well, I'll fire off our first question, or Dan's first question. I'll read it off. And this is a two-part question. I'm glad you rephrased it. Who, in your opinion, is the most collectible white jazz artist, and whose LPs fetch the most prices, I guess, on eBay auctions? You may go first, sir.
It's something we touched on last time briefly. I thought we could elaborate on it a little bit more. And there's reasons for it. Their white record labels sold more records, which is part of this equation. There's just more contemporary and Pacific and those records out there to be had. But there's still a few guys that fetch pretty good money. Bill Evans, especially on Riverside. His Riverside records go for big bucks. Art Pepper's records could go for pretty good money, especially some of those obscure labels on the West Coast, Jazz West, Intro, those little small labels. Getz, there's a few of his pieces I've seen go for pretty good money. Some of his Roost 10-inch stuff, the more bebop stuff. And of course, Chet Baker is the other one that comes to mind from that era, whose records can fetch pretty good money. But when you get past those four, the Jerry Mulligans, they sit there.
They sure do.
You can buy Mulligan's records for $6 and they're great.
Yeah, I agree totally.
Who else is there that's in that white canon from that era?
It's always, I only judge by the Jazz Record Center auctions, which I help with, which are predominantly all Blue Note, and occasionally he'll sneak in something else. The first pressing Art Pepper. I don't think we've ever put up a Stan Getz. He's put up some Zoot Sims records occasionally, or stuff on more obscure labels like some of the ones you mentioned that are harder to find, that only insider jazz collectors go. But really, Bill Evans is pretty much, he's the top of the heap, both in, he's also the most, just to the average person. If we have somebody come in the store and they've already got Coltrane and Miles and all that, I steer them to Evans. And Chet Baker made so many records. There are so many Chet Baker reissues, probably more than anybody. We have like that many, and each one is a different title. It's crazy. And a lot of them are on Grey Market.
And I think some of that was recorded in Italy and other places like that. And the thing about Evans records is it's really only the Riversides that fetch that kind of money. When he goes to Verve, those titles can be had for 30, 40, 50 bucks for really nice copies.
Yeah, it's weird. Again, why do you think that is?
It's mostly distribution. Verve probably sold 4 times more copies of those records than Riverside did. And of course, there's some change. And those who don't know, Verve kind of guts the small labels. They take Jimmy Smith from Blue Note. They take Bill Evans from Riverside. They take Kai Winding from Fantasy. They kind of were just grabbing the talent from all these smaller labels when Creed Taylor came over and changed what Verve was about. And Verve's distribution is just so much bigger, so much more reach, so many more copies. But Evans, of all those guys that came over, probably changes his sound the least. Wes Montgomery, Jimmy Smith, all the guys start making bigger kind of records with Oliver Nelson arrangements.
Bigger budgets, yeah.
And Creed Taylor managing. Evans kind of was still doing Evans stuff for the most part. You get those records.
Yeah, he stuck to the trio. And
Evans did stay to that trio and that kind of minimal sound, even though there's a few records he does that Alone With Myself, it's overdubbed himself. He's playing with himself on that one.
I love that record. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, those records, rarely do you see them go for more than $50-$60.
I know occasionally Fred will put a Verve on auction. It'll always sell, but it won't go for much. But all that stuff when it comes in the store just flies out. Bill Evans records they're not always well played, but those are, beloved records. And if anything, he is still the most, influential of all the pianists. He still sounds totally contemporary. You talk about Keith Jarrett later. Keith Jarrett's just Paul Bley and Bill Evans, really, with some more speed. He's still so contemporary.
How much of Evans' legacy is directly linked to Kinda Blue and being in Miles' group for that brief moment?
I don't think it is. I think he looms so large on his own.
I don't think so. I came to Evans through Miles, and Bill Evans' first record on Riverside reportedly sold like 200 copies in its first year.
But when it came out, but long term,
58, right before.
Right.
Kinda Blue. Kinda Blue puts them on the map.
Puts him on the map, but I think long term, I don't think he needs Kinda Blue to be Bill Evans. He made so many great records, and they're so pop. I mean, look at Record Store Day. They keep reissuing those titles. That Some Other Time is a huge title. They had to reissue that because it was so popular. But I do think Evans, I think he probably wrote Blue and Green, which was criminal for Miles Davis to take that from him, because that's such an incredible song.
I just watched this documentary with Ron Carter, Freddie Hubbard, James Moody was there, the little sax playing Heath brother, Jimmy Heath, probably from 2005 or so. And they're all sitting there talking about Miles. And you can see them kind of gritting their teeth and biting their tongue at times.
Really?
They respect and love the guy, but they all admitted how much of a jerk he could be at times and how difficult Miles really could be.
Yeah, it's funny, the opposite of Coltrane. I did a video on Greg Tate, the great writer, hip hop, everything else past, and he, in his book, he has a chapter on Coltrane, and I read a part of the chapter where it said Coltrane, bought guys groceries, lent them rent money. I mean, he treated people, he was beloved. Yeah. I don't know if Miles wasn't really beloved. So
I think you loved Miles for the payday.
Yeah,
it was the best paying job in jazz at that point.
And you got to play with some of the other greatest musicians ever, and he got really great stuff out of them. Yeah. I know Miles fired Coltrane at one point and then brought him back, I guess, right? Yeah, because he junked out.
He dismissed R. Kelly for being late one day, and Red Garland put R. Kelly in that. They put R. Kelly in.
Right.
Yeah, put Wynton Kelly in that chair.
Two gangsters, yeah.
Then he dismissed Wynton Kelly and put Bill Evans on that chair, and then he rehired Wynton Kelly. And then Wynton Kelly, Chambers, and Jimmy Cobb all left together and worked as a trio through the rest of the 60s.
And there's that joke. I mean, it was put forth as a joke, but probably not entirely a joke. Bill Evans was saying something, and he said, when we want the white opinion, we'll ask for it, which I'm sure was a joke. He had anybody playing with him who could play, but it was also, a little slap, I guess.
Yeah. Number 2, who do you listen to more, Ella Fitzgerald or Billie Holiday?
I almost never listen to Billie Holiday, but I listen to Ella Fitzgerald all the time.
Really?
Yeah, just because her sense of swing, and particularly those late 50s, early 60s records. In saying that, I was out at my friend John DeVore, who builds the speakers, and he had a bunch of 78s, including a Billie Holiday 78. Wow. And it was just on his system, if we're talking state of the art, makes my system look like a toy. It was unbelievable. I mean, it was just astounding what a 78 has, the amount of energy and all that. But I will listen to Billie Holiday, but not as much as Ella. How about you?
I love Ella because of her range and the fun she has with her voice. But I listen to Billie probably 3 times more. The melancholy. I love the backgrounds that she chooses much more somber and melancholic. Ella's stuff is bright and swinging. Spring Day, and Billie Holiday stuff tends to be kind of a cold winter afternoon.
What's your favorite era of Billie Holiday to listen to?
They were both Norman Grand's pet projects, and Norman Grand started Verve to work with Ella, and so her Verve period is obviously her classic, beautiful stuff. All the songbooks that she did, and with Billie, it's really those records with Ben Webster and Sweets Edison and those small groups that she was doing for Clef and Norgran under Norman Grand's 52, 53, 54 as her health was declining.
But the Columbia comes before those labels.
Yeah.
That's when she's young. That's what I love. And I realized listening, a lot of her stuff was on 78, and listening to John's 78s, played with a state-of-the-art EMT preamp where he can dial in the correct EQ curves. You realize that a lot of the 78 transfers are just junk. Even with the Billie Holiday box set I have from the 90s, when they had that thing they called Cedar to reprocess it, I mean, it just doesn't translate in a way. And that's some of her. I mean, if I listen to Billie, it'll be that stuff, because the older stuff, she sounds a lot more tragic, not too happy.
Yeah, tragic and trashed.
Yeah, tragic and trashed. But be interesting. What if we could have them at the same age, recording at their peaks in the late 50s? What would that have been like?
It's funny how iconic both of them are, yet how polar opposite they both are.
Yeah, I mean, they both had sad lives. Ella was nothing like Billie Holiday's, obviously, but Ella has that forever girlishness. I know Ella, there's a decent documentary of her on Netflix, or maybe it's on Prime, and she was briefly a pimp or a madam, very briefly, but I don't think Billie was ever a madam, was she?
I know she worked in brothels as a young girl,
right,
entertaining and singing along with the piano players. And she was a street girl from a very young age.
And so beautiful. She must have had a rough time of it.
One of the most telling Billie Holiday stories is when she worked with Artie Shaw. She's worked with Basie. She worked with a few other singers. But Artie Shaw hires her to work in his big band. And the hotel they were playing in, the patrons were complaining about her riding in the elevator. And the front desk is like, she's the entertainment. And they get a lot of guests from down south who were in the hotel, and they had to ask Artie Shaw to ask Billie to ride in the freight elevator. And Billie refused, and Artie Shaw couldn't blame her. And she never really toured again after that. She pretty much stayed in New York.
What year was that?
I'm going to guess early 40s, maybe late 30s.
It's a lot of white big band singers, a lot of white female singers will credit Billie Holiday, and you can hear it. I mean, you can hear Billie Holiday in Peggy Lee. Who else do you think she had a big influence on among all
Marilyn
the
Moore
white singers?
Was a great record on Bethlehem. Channels Billie Holiday as good as anybody in the business. That record's fantastic. If you ever have a chance to find it, Marilyn Moore, Groovin', maybe it's called. It's such a good record on Bethlehem. She actually was friends with Billie, and Billie kind of babysat her kids at times. Because Marilyn Moore was married to Al Cohn.
Oh, wow.
No one sounds and does Billie quite like her.
But do you think she also had an influence on the singers that became really popular? I mean, the big band singers, they were working, I guess, at the same time, obviously, and they were probably the same age as Billie.
Yeah.
Allison and Chris Connor and all that. But they don't seem to be. Chris Connor doesn't sound like she's doing Billie Holiday.
No. And I don't get that much from Peggy Lee either.
Really? I get a little bit.
I think Peggy has more Ella in her. I love Peggy Lee. Peggy's fun.
She's fun, but she seems a little darker and a little more sly and a little cooler.
Peggy Lee's life story is a very convoluted tale of divorce and lying and misrepresenting the truth. And she's quite the character, her life story. She's from North Dakota, believe it or not.
And this is an interesting question. I'll let you go first. Aside from the singers, who are your favorite women in jazz?
I'm just going to read off this list of names. People are going to know some of them, maybe not all of them. Shirley Scott, the great organ player, is probably my favorite. I'm a big fan of her. Mary Lou Williams, another fantastic pianist. Corky Hale, who actually played the harp, worked with Sinatra, was also a pianist and a singer. She's fantastic. Melba Liston was one of the great trombone players who worked with everybody, but didn't get a lot of recording as a leader, which a lot of these girls didn't. Her one record on Hi-Fi Jazz is fantastic. No, sorry. It's on Hi-Fi Jazz. It's
I have that. I don't know the label either.
Metro Jazz with like 5 other trombone players. But that's a killer record, and it goes for hundreds or $200 if you can find it. Terry Pollard was a great vibraphone pianist player who was very forgotten. From the UK, there's Marion McPartland, who was fantastic. Another little piano player named Pat Moran. Vi Red was a little alto sax player who was fiery. Dorothy Ashby, the great harp player. Clora Bryant was another Texas.
I don't know her at all.
She has a record on Mode Records. And her history, I was just reading about recently. She's quite the gal as well. And to be a woman in jazz was a difficult thing because you had to have all the ability. Yeah. You had to have all the ability the men did, plus the personality to withstand living in that male-dominated universe. It takes a tough girl. For Shirley Scott to have made 50 records in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, she's a bad girl.
Yeah, well, I think she was, well hooked up with Eddie Lockjaw Davis and Shirley Stanley Turrentine. And this is a good time because, you're much more better versed in that than I am. But there are so many great female musicians now that are truly excellent. The number one being Maria Schneider, who leads big bands that are easily as great as any big band of the past. And her big bands have been together, the big band, for so long, they really play as one organism. The problem with her is all her records are on Artist House, and you have to subscribe to get the record. Wow. It's kind of ridiculous because like at the store, Fred collects them. You can't just walk in the store and buy her records. Plus, she's campaigned or spoken in Congress about data managing and data farming that all the giant companies do, and not only how it robs musicians, but how it's dangerous to human beings' quality of life. But then there's so many other great musicians. The tenor saxophonist Melissa Aldana, she's just really something. The drummer Susie Ibarra, who played free jazz but now plays. She plays all this Philippine percussion mixed in with drum set. She's a phenomenal composer. An avant-garde drummer named Kate Gentile, who plays with people like Joe McPhee and people of that ilk. Cecile McLaurin-Salvant, she's famous now. She's sort of an extension of Ella. She swings, has a beautiful tone. Thana Alexa, a rising Grammy-nominated vocalist who sort of comes out of Flora Purim. Stacey.
Do you listen to a lot of these people?
Pardon?
You listen to a lot of these girls?
I've listened to all of them. Yeah, I've written about. I did the first Cecile McLaurin-Salvant interviews in Downbeat. I wrote Thana Alexa's last bio. They're great. Stacey Kent is like really old school. She's fantastic. Susie Ibarra is sort of a friend of mine. She's just gifted the way she can. Wow. She has a drum set, but she'll have these Kulintang bells and gongs, and it's a real sound world. So, but I think it's still hard. I went to a club to hear Melissa Aldana, and then I hear, I know some musicians, they'll kind of trash her behind her back. She's fucking amazing. She's great. Her band is off the charts. There's a lot of great female players.
If other musicians are talking about you, usually you're doing something.
Exactly.
2 other guys I want to mention from back in the day, Japanese Toshiko Akiyoshi, fantastic pianist. Her work at Storyville was great. Married Charlie Mariano. They did some great work together. And I also want to mention Hazel Scott, who was Trinidadian born, moved to America, and became the first Black woman to host a television show.
Oh, really?
Was a fabulous singer, fabulous pianist.
Was she really a jazz pianist? Was she really a jazz pianist?
Oh, check out her record on Debut. It's fantastic. Fantastic stuff. Yeah, the women had it tough, man.
Yeah, not to mention all getting hit on by the guys in the band.
Yeah, you had to put up with a lot to stick it out in that business.
Yoko Ono versus Alice Coltrane. Both husbands were spiritual, intellectual giants of our time. Both gals were art majors. That's interesting. Whose men loved them deeply. They both kind of bootstrapped themselves onto their husbands' careers. I take issue with that. Which woman made a bigger impact, and which do you prefer?
Yoko and Alice are both guilty to me of the same thing, kind of bootstrapping themselves onto their men's careers. Yoko is a tough pill to swallow.
For you.
Just her voice. It's fingers on a chalkboard. And for me, that live piece in Toronto, which we talked about the other day, all aside too, you can get through it one time and you're never going to listen to it again. Like, it's not a regular everyday listen. Then with Alice Coltrane, I remember a lot of people when she first started working in Coltrane's group, a lot of people questioned her ability as a pianist, whether she should really even be in that chair. And I think even some of Coltrane's band members were casting a suspicious eye. But it's interesting how both Lennon and Coltrane seem to love these women so deeply for their artism, for their artsiness and their spiritual leanings, that they overlooked any shortcomings they had and just embraced them so strongly. And they both obviously worked their way into their men's bands, and both created a lifetime of careers post their men passing.
I don't think of Yoko as a voice; it's more of a sound effect. It's
Sure.
it's not a voice per se, but she had a well-established, clear career before she got with Lennon. She was part of the New York scene with John Cage and Lamont Young and all that crazy stuff. And she was already doing gallery shows on her own. I think he needed her more than the other way around. And I have seen video of Alice Coltrane playing, and she has that very unusual thing, but she could definitely play. I mean, she was a player. But I think both of them are what those guys needed to go the next step they wanted to go. I mean, just recently, like in the last couple of months, they gave Yoko authorship of Imagine, because apparently Lennon wasn't brave enough to cite her for all the lyrics that are hers. And if anything, Imagine, whether you like it or not, it's a big pillar of like this whole different way of thinking. It's almost a new age thing. The Beatles were so important beyond music. They brought in mysticism, and Lennon was such an abstract thinker. And if you see this 6-hour Get Back, which I've watched twice because I'm a huge Beatle fan, Yoko says nothing. She doesn't say 5 words in the whole thing. And Linda Eastman is there too, and she's hanging out. She says more. And there are conversation between Linda and Yoko, and you really see there are people all over the place. And Paul even says in one part, it's going to be hilarious, people think in 50 years that she broke up the band. To me, that was just male bashing to say she broke up the band. She's like a little fly. And if anything, you listen to Lennon a lot in different places, he takes the piss out of her all the time. But I think both of those women enabled those guys to go forward. And her records, Alice Coltrane's records, are incredibly collectible, especially that one, Patut Al Daoud. I can't, you know what I'm talking about? It's got not been reissued. Those records are very hard to find. And I love those records. That's really the beginning of spiritual jazz. I actually think Yoko and Alice Coltrane were ahead of their time, just in the same way that, this is my opinion, all the stuff like Miles' Live Evil and Live the Fillmore West, it's almost like, being sandblasted. I think some of that makes sense more with modern electronica, and Yoko makes more sense with all that.
Between Alice and Yoko, who would have had more of a career without their men helping establish them?
Popular career? What do you think? I think Alice would have had a career of some sort, even if she didn't get entree to those same musicians. Yoko wasn't a musician. She would have been just another freak in the art world. I mean, John Cage, who can listen to that stuff? I can't listen to that. Porter dropping down a garbage chute. I mean, what? But Alice was already a force, and do you like those records? They swing. Ben Rowley plays drums on a lot of those records of hers.
Excuse me. I have some Journey and Satchidananda. I like that one quite a bit.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Some of the later ones get a little bit too mystical for me. They feel a little pretentious at times. That's just my take.
I know the ones they've reissued recently are just, if you're a Buddhist, buy those records. If you're a jazz fan, don't. I mean, I don't want to hear, I got nothing against chanting, but I don't want to hear a record of chanting. It's got nothing to do with jazz. But I think Alice would have had she would have been some sort of figure. Maybe she would have been a figure anyway, because she was already out and playing in New York. I've seen those videos of her.
The interesting thing about Coltrane and Lennon is the parallels between these two guys. They're both these kind of giants of the 20th century, as important to their respective genres as anybody in those genres. Both were very highly intellectual. Both were very highly spiritual. And they both were searching through the world's religions, looking for truth and trying to find a path. And in some ways, their path ended up being the women they selected in some ways. So there's a lot of parallels between the two, which I think makes for an interesting comparison.
I've thought about that as well. And I have not seen an article like in the New York Times or anywhere that addresses that. And I've thought about it as well. It seems kind of obvious, right? These two giants, and they both needed those women. I mean, we know more about John and Yoko because they were such pop figures. We don't know about the relationship about
John and Alice.
Yeah, because they wasn't all over the freaking magazines and all that crap. Right. Very much true. And it's interesting also to look at they both birthed musicians. Robbie Coltrane is fantastic. Sean Lennon's okay. But Robbie Coltrane, man, he's a force. He's really something.
I heard a little bit.
Man, I saw him live at a Winter Jazz Fest playing a duo with David Varelli's a piano player. It was something else. I mean, that cat can really, really play. I mean, I think he's out from under his father's shadow. Who in your mind is more important to jazz, Metheny or Jarrett?
I'm going to go Jarrett. His work, obviously, with Charles Lloyd and that group and the quartet in the late 60s leads into his work in the 70s. And I have that 3-record box set. Fantastic, delicate player, but I'm by no means an expert on either of them. Metheny, I've never been too into. I find his music always kind of ethereal. And I hate to say soulless, but just very relying on his virtuosity.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen Jarrett play his solo concerts, and they're unbelievable. I mean, they're awesome. You'll be awestruck because he creates entire beyond songs. These compositions were just sort of almost like watching Paul McCartney write Get Back. There's a part in the video where he's just riffing on his bass, and you see him in his mind writing Get Back. It just all comes together. It's kind of shocking. But right. Keith Jarrett will do that same thing amidst all these incredible improvisations. But in saying that, you know, Metheny is a guitarist, a composer, an arranger, a band leader. He often talks about the fact that one of his biggest jobs is being a band leader. He's brought a lot of great musicians, including Antonio Sanchez, who's a great drummer. I don't really think he's a jazz drummer. And I you know, we talked about it before. You know, I can't win you over to the Metheny camp, but and also I mean, Jarrett's great. I love the Still Life Talking album, or Still Live rather. Still Life Talking is Pat. That was sort of one of the things I really studied Jack DeJohnette, and what a beautiful player. And I also like his, you know, when you go to one of his concerts, people, you know, that's another guy I like to bash him. Oh, he's such a pain in the ass. When you go to one of his concerts, I've only been to one. He wants everybody to shut up so everybody's on the same wavelength. Because once you're he wants you to be as into it as he is. Because Jarrett.
Jarrett, okay.
Because you know, he's famous for. I mean, I've been there at live concerts. Well, one where he stops playing until the guy in the 80th row stops coughing. But when everybody is like quiet and focused, then his game just takes off. Metheny's more of a machine, and Metheny can turn it on. And I think Metheny's a workaholic, and he's at the point now where, you know, he's basically just repeating himself. That's why he keeps working harder to embrace younger musicians. Yeah. But I'd be curious to know what other people think besides us two curmudgeons.
So if you had to give a nod to one of them, who would it be?
A nod for what?
Just the more important, impactful player.
Just as far as being a musician?
Or just their impact on jazz?
Metheny's more of an innovator of a guitar sound. People still take his sound, which even isn't his sound anymore. But Jarrett, I think, is just Paul Bley and Bill Evans. Sure. That lineage. Yeah, and that's where I don't see him pushing it further, but his solo improvisations, but they're not really jazz. So that's a good classical mixed up with jazz. Yeah, and just that incredible talk about I mean, I wouldn't go see a Pat Metheny solo guitar concert. Right. Right. Jarrett is just, you know, he's just otherworldly. So I don't know. I'll be curious to see what people think. And then this is all on you. I have no idea. The Hank Garland, Dick Garcia controversy. Are they one and the same? What? I don't know anything about this. The great country guitar player, Hank Garland, who got into a car accident and his career was cut very short. His brother and his family's estate is claiming that the guitar player, Dick Garcia, is one and the same. And there's so little information on the Dick Garcia that upon researching and trying to figure it out, I didn't come to a clear answer. I've discussed it with other people in the jazz world through my channel and the Facebook groups, and there doesn't seem to be any consensus. The brothers' claim may have some validity to it. Garcia's career certainly seems to drop off the same time as Garland's does. But Wikipedia has Dick Garcia still being alive, so I'm guessing it's not true. But if anybody out there knows anything about that, I'd be curious to hear what people think. So are you saying that it's like a conspiracy theory that they're the same person?
His brother claims that his contract, Hank Garland's contract in Nashville, prohibited him from recording jazz. So he created this nom de plume, this fake name, so he could record some stuff in New York because they wanted him to record this stuff so badly and they were offering him good money. So he created an alias to do it. That's what his brother's claiming.
Well, do they look alike? I mean,
find 4 pictures of both of them. You can find some pictures of Hank.
Right.
Pictures of Dick Garcia out there.
Oh, I've never even heard of Dick Garcia. He played guitar?
Yeah, his record on Dawn, the Dawn label, A Message from Garcia, is fantastic. There's another record on ABC with Jimmy Rainey and a few other guitar players. It's called The Foremost Guitars. Dick Garcia's
right. I have that. Huh.
Flames on the Beach. And again, there's his brother saying that that's Hank Garland. I've asked a few guitar player friends of mine about the phrasing and the playing styles, and they were both unwilling to commit either way. They could be him. They don't think it is, but they're not sure.
Wow.
So it's just a bit of an interesting tidbit.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah.
The conspiracy rabbit hole in jazz.
It's a weird one.